You are not behind because you lack talent. You are not stuck because the timing is wrong. You are exactly where you are right now because of something far more specific, something nobody around you is going to tell you, because most of them are doing the exact same thing. You are talking too much about the wrong things. Harrison here, and I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes because what I'm about to share with you changed the way I move, the way I think, and honestly, the way I win. This is not motivation. This is not a pep talk. This is a direct confrontation with a pattern that is quietly draining your power every single day. The Stoics, men like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus, they did not build legacies by announcing them. They built them in silence. They protected something most people give away for free: their energy, their plans, their intentions, their inner world. And the moment you understand why they did that, you will never look at your words the same way again. There are 6 things you must stop sharing with people. Not because the world is against you, but because your silence is the most strategic weapon you have never been taught to use. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what to protect, why it matters, and what it has already been costing you every time you opened your mouth too soon. The first one is going to make you uncomfortable. And that is exactly the point. Here is something your brain does that you have probably never noticed. The moment you tell someone about a problem you are carrying, you feel better. Not because the problem is solved, not because anything changed, but because your nervous system just got a hit of relief it did not earn. That feeling, that release you get from venting, from pouring it all out, from telling the story again and again, it is one of the most seductive traps the human mind has ever built. And I want you to hear this clearly. This relief is a lie. Psychologists call it emotional discharge. You release the pressure, but you keep the wound. You feel lighter for an hour, maybe a day, and then the weight comes back heavier, because now the story has more listeners, more versions, more life inside it. You did not process the pain. You fed it an audience. Seneca understood this long before modern psychology had a name for it. He wrote that the man who constantly rehearses his suffering becomes a student of it, and students of suffering graduate into victims. That is not a philosophy. That is a warning. Think about the last time you told someone about something that hurt you. Not once, but repeatedly. Did it heal, or did it simply become the story you are known for? Because there is a moment, and most people never catch it, where your pain stops being something that happened to you and starts being something you carry as identity. The Stoic does not suppress pain. The Stoic processes it inward, through reason, through reflection, through the private discipline of confronting what is real and releasing what is not. Marcus Aurelius did not write his journals for anyone to read. He wrote them to argue with himself, to work through the weight without burdening the world, and without letting the world define his wounds. Your outpour is costing you more than comfort. It is costing you clarity. Every time you rehearse the story of how you were wronged, betrayed, overlooked, or failed, you are choosing that version of reality over the one where you move forward. You are handing the controls of your present to an event that no longer exists anywhere except inside your own retelling. Stop narrating your pain to people who cannot heal it. Start confronting it in the only place where healing is actually possible. Inside yourself, in silence, with honesty. And if you think protecting your inner world from outside noise ends with your emotions, wait until you hear what happens when you expose something even more personal than your pain. There is a moment in every person's transformation that is sacred. It is the moment right before you become who you are working to be. The moment the identity is forming but has not yet solidified. The moment the new version of you is still fragile, still raw, still finding its footing. And that is exactly the moment most people destroy it. Not through laziness, not through failure, through exposure. We've seen this happen countless times. Someone decides to change. They start waking up earlier, reading more, eating better, thinking differently. And within days, sometimes hours, they're telling everyone, posting about it, practicing it. And slowly, without even realizing it, the transformation ceases to be something the person is experiencing and becomes something they are publicizing. The applause arrives before the work is done. And the applause is enough to make the brain believe it already got there. This is not a motivational observation. This is behavioral science. When you publicly declare a new identity before it is anchored in consistent action, your brain registers the social recognition as partial achievement. The drive that was fueling your change begins to lose its urgency. You told the story, people responded. The internal pressure releases, and the momentum dies quietly, while your audience still thinks you are moving. Epictetus was ruthless about this. He said that if you want to make progress, be willing to appear ignorant or naive about things outside your work. Do not perform your becoming. Become, and let the performance be the result. The people who change most completely are almost always the ones you never saw coming. They did not announce the shift. They did not document the struggle. They disappeared into the work and reappeared as someone different. That silence was not modesty. It was strategy. It was protection. Because here is what exposure does to an unfinished transformation. It invites opinion. And opinion, even well-meaning opinion, plants doubt in soil that needs certainty to grow. Someone says, "Are you sure that is realistic?" Someone else says, "I tried something similar and it did not work." Someone you trust says, "Just be careful." And suddenly the fragile new version of you is surrounded by the weight of other people's limitations dressed up as concern. Your evolution is not a conversation. It is a construction. And construction sites are not open to the public. Protect the version of you that is still being built. Show the world the finished work. Because the most powerful thing you can do is not explain your change. It is to simply appear, one day, undeniably different. And if exposing your transformation is dangerous, what I'm about to tell you is even more disturbing. Because true vulnerability lies not in what you show, but in what you trust. There is a difference between trust and exposure. Most people never learn it until it costs them something they cannot get back. You have been told your entire life that vulnerability is strength, that opening up builds connection, that sharing your fears, your doubts, your deepest uncertainties with the people around you is the path to authentic relationships. And is not here to tell you that is entirely wrong. He is here to tell you that most people apply that principle with zero discernment, and it is quietly dismantling them from the inside out. There is a version of vulnerability that is courageous. It is the kind that deepens a relationship that has already proven itself trustworthy over time, through consistency, through discretion, through reciprocity. That kind of openness is rare and worth protecting. And then there is the other kind, the kind that happens at dinner tables, in group chats, in casual conversations with people who have never truly been tested. The kind where you lay out your anxieties, your insecurities, your private fears. Not because the relationship earned it, but because the moment felt right, because you needed to release it, because silence felt heavier than speaking. Seneca called this one of the most common and most costly errors a person can make. He said that sharing your inner world with someone before you truly know them is like handing a weapon to a stranger and assuming they will never use it. Not because people are evil, but because information, once given, belongs to whoever received it. And you have no control over what they do with it next. Every vulnerability you expose without criteria becomes a map of where you can be reached, where you can be shaken, where pressure applied in exactly the right place will produce exactly the reaction someone needs from you. In a world of genuine friends, that map is sacred. In a world of mixed intentions, that map is a liability. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire and kept his deepest battles entirely to himself, not because he was cold, not because he lacked feeling, but because he understood that a leader who exposes every fracture invites those fractures to be widened. His private journals were never meant to be read. They were a sealed room where he could be honest with himself without the consequence of that honesty being used against him. You do not need to become suspicious of everyone around you. What you need is to become intentional about who earns access to which parts of you. The people who have demonstrated loyalty over time, who have held your confidence without weaponizing it, who have shown up without an agenda, those people deserve your trust. Everyone else deserves your presence, your warmth, and your silence about anything that truly matters. Build the architecture of your inner world with the same care you would build a home. Not every room is open to every guest. Some doors exist specifically because not everyone who knocks deserves to enter. And if you think this is only about the people you confide in, what comes next will shift the entire frame. Because the most overlooked drain on your power has nothing to do with other people at all. It has everything to do with what you do with your own energy before anyone else is even involved. Most people think energy is physical. They think it is about sleep, nutrition, exercise, recovery. And yes, those things matter. But there is another economy of energy that nobody teaches you, one that is invisible, constant, and far more decisive than anything happening in your body. It is the economy of what you spend your attention on before the world even has a chance to demand anything from you. Every morning you wake up with a finite reserve, not just physical fuel, but cognitive clarity, emotional bandwidth, and what the Stoics called the ruling faculty, the part of you that decides, discerns, and directs. That reserve is your most valuable asset, and most people have already spent half of it before they have done a single thing that matters. They wake up and immediately check what other people are saying. They replay yesterday's argument in their head. They rehearse conversations that have not happened yet. They scroll through the curated lives of strangers and unconsciously measure themselves against a fiction. They think about what someone said, what someone meant, what someone probably thinks of them, and by the time the actual work of the day begins, the sharpest part of them is already gone. I want you to reflect on this for a moment, because it's not about discipline in the way most people talk about it. It's about understanding that your attention is a commodity, and you're spending it in places that will never give you anything in return. Epictetus built his entire philosophy around one distinction. There are things within your control and things outside of it. Your thoughts, your choices, your responses, those are yours. Everything else, the opinions of others, the outcome of events, the behavior of people around you, none of it belongs to you. And every moment you spend your energy on what does not belong to you is a moment stolen from what does. The man who wakes up and immediately enters the noise of the world is not starting his day. He is surrendering it. Before he has written a single word, made a single decision, or taken a single step toward what matters, he has already handed his most lucid hours to the chaos of external demands and other people's realities. The Stoic practice is different. It begins in silence. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of deliberate ownership. You decide before the world speaks what deserves your energy today. You set the terms. You protect the first and finest hours of your cognition for the work that only you can do. Everything else waits. This is not a productivity trick. It is a philosophical stance. It is the recognition that your energy, your attention, your inner clarity, these are not infinite resources to be distributed freely. They are sacred instruments to be used with precision. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And the greatest waste of human energy is not exhaustion from effort. It is the chronic, invisible drain of attention spent on things that were never yours to carry. The grudges, the comparisons, the hypothetical arguments, the need for approval, the fear of judgment, every one of those is a leak in a vessel that could otherwise be full. Seal the leaks. Guard the reserve. Spend your energy only where it compounds into something real. Because once you understand how to protect your energy, the next question becomes what to do with it when no one is watching. And it is there, more than anything else I'm going to tell you today, that everything either falls into place or completely falls apart. This is the one that separates everyone. Not talent, not opportunity, not intelligence, not connections. What separates the people who actually build something lasting from the ones who spend their lives almost getting there is what they do in the hours when there is no audience, no validation, no recognition, and no guarantee that any of it will ever pay off. I want to be direct with you about something that most content creators will never say out loud. The version of discipline that gets posted, filmed, subtitled, and shared isn't discipline. It's theater. And theater, no matter how convincing the acting, doesn't build anything concrete. It only builds the image of someone who builds things. Real discipline is unglamorous. It is the work done at an hour when no one would know if you skipped it. It is the standard maintained in a moment when lowering it would cost you nothing socially. It is the choice made in private that your future self will either thank you for or have to reckon with. That is it. There is nothing aesthetic about it. There is nothing worth posting. And that invisibility is precisely what makes it powerful. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire in the known world. He had every reason to perform virtue, to be seen practicing philosophy, to make his discipline a public monument to his character. Instead, he wrote his reflections in a private journal, never intended for publication, never meant for anyone's eyes but his own. He held himself to a standard in silence, and that silence was not humility for its own sake. It was the understanding that the moment virtue becomes performance, it stops being virtue and becomes vanity, wearing virtue's clothes. There is a psychological mechanism at work here that most people fall into without ever recognizing it. When you share your discipline publicly, when you document the early morning, the cold routine, the rigorous schedule, the brain begins to associate the sharing with the reward. Over time, the sharing becomes the point. The actual work becomes secondary to the documentation of the work. And slowly, without any conscious decision, you are no longer building. You are narrating a construction that stopped happening. Epictetus said it with a precision that still cuts centuries later. Do not explain your principles. Embody them, because a person who must constantly declare their commitment to growth is almost always the person who has quietly stopped growing and needs the declaration to fill the space where the growth used to be. Your private hours are your real biography. Every choice made when no reward is visible, every standard held when no one would notice if it slipped, every moment of effort pushed through without an audience. That is the actual record of who you are. Not the highlight, not the caption, not the version you present to the world. The private version, the one only you know, the one that accumulates silently into either a life of genuine substance or a life of carefully maintained appearance. This is what we know to be true, not as philosophy, but as something observable in every person who has ever built something worthwhile. Those who endure, those who multiply, those who wake up years later surrounded by something real, are almost always the least visible during the construction. They did not remain silent out of fear. They remained silent because they understood that silence, applied with intention, is not the absence of power. It is where power lives. Your life is the only argument that will ever truly matter. Not what you said about it, not how you framed it, not the story you told along the way. The life itself, the result, the thing that stands when the noise stops. Build it like that, in silence, with everything you have, for no audience but the future version of yourself who will either be grateful or will wish you had. That is the final lesson. And it was never about what you say. It was always about what you become when you stop saying anything at all.